The 70s seemed to have been some kind of turning point for horror. The classic monsters of vampires, werewolves, and the like had run their course. First, Universal Studios, then Hammer Films, had just wrung every last dollar out of these properties that they could. I think audiences just couldn't relate to European castles, spooky crypts, and mad scientists anymore. The culture was changing rapidly, and all you had to do was turn on the nightly news, and you could find things way scarier than Frankenstein's monster. The Vietnam War overseas and the anti-war demonstrations back home, with Charles Manson and the Tate LaBianca murders, soured the public on the hippie movement. The emergence of serial killers like Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, and the Son of Sam. New York City became synonymous with garbage strikes and high crime rates. The Watergate scandal broke our trust in the White House. Civil rights, gay rights, and women's rights were all being met with resistance. On and on. The 70s were pretty scary all by themselves. But with that in mind, it gave filmmakers both the challenge and the freedom to try and reinvent horror for a modern audience. Some took the monster movie and reskinned it. We got a monster at the beach with Jaws, a monster in space with Alien, and a monster in your house for Halloween. Americans were becoming fascinated with the occult and non-Christian religions, so we got a lot of religious and occult-themed films like The Exorcist, Amityville, The Omen, and The Wicker Man. The Italian giallo films were getting some release in the States, and those paved the way to the American slasher film like Black Christmas. We even got some cool experimental films like Eraserhead and Suspiria. All in all, the 70s are possibly my favorite decade for horror. For this episode, I have compiled a list of my favorite 10 films from the 70s. Needless to say, it was extremely hard to whittle this list down to only 10. So I present them here in no particular order. Now please keep in mind, I am not saying these are the best films of the 1970s, just my favorite films, or films that affected me the most on my horror journey. If there is a comment section below, please tell me what your favorite horror films of the 70s are. With that being said, let's get to the list. Number 1, The Omen. The Omen is a heartwarming story of a wealthy and influential family that gets their baby swapped for the Antichrist at the hospital and soon finds out that raising little Satan can be hell. The Omen, while called an Exorcist copy at the time, has really only gotten better with age. The cast is exceptional, the production value is top shelf, and the creepy, Oscar-winning, mock-religious soundtrack is perfect for your next Halloween party. Combining end-times religious themes, conspiracy theories, satanic panic, a creepy kid, and some really elaborate deaths, we get some real high-class horror here. The church conspiracy to meddle in the end times is practically a subgenre now. The Omen spawned 3 sequels, a remake, and most recently a pretty well done prequel in 2024. Number 2, The Exorcist. 1973 brings us one of the greatest films of all times. What makes this horror film so great is that it is actually a family drama about a desperate mother trying to find answers for her daughter's terminal condition. That condition just happens to be demonic possession. Director William Friedkin takes the time to develop the story, the lore, and we genuinely care for these characters long before the bad shit starts happening to them. So that way when it does, it makes the brutality of the events feel almost personal. I was 6 years old when this came out, and even though I couldn't see it, I do remember what a big deal it was from the news and talk shows. People stood in line for hours to see it multiple times, while others tried to ban it and actively picketed it. It seemed like from that moment on, there was a wave of occult interest and satanic panic. Even the pastor at my church saw it several times and spoke about it from the pulpit. He loved it. It's a must-see for any horror fan, and one I recommend revisiting if you haven't in a while. There is a fantastic 4K restoration out there of the director's cut that looks amazing. Number 3, The Other. 1972. This movie left a real mark on me. It messed me up. It would run on TV, and every time I saw it, it just re-traumatized me. I don't want to spoil any of it, but it is a pretty convoluted tale. There are these twins. One is good and one is bad. There's a big reveal in the middle of the film that keeps you wondering if you're watching a tale of the supernatural or a tale of madness. Meanwhile, the bodies start to accumulate in their immediate circle. The real power of the film lies in both how beautiful the cinematography is and how much of the film is told from a child's perspective. It connects us back to our own childhood fears, revolving around death, grieving, and our own mortality. The twins are played by real twins and may be the best child performances I have ever seen. Do not miss out on this one. At the time of filming, this physical media for it is out of print, but I did find it complete on YouTube to watch. Number 4, Halloween, 1974. While it did not invent the slasher genre, it certainly distilled it down to its purest form, and therefore defines the genre. From here on out, all babysitters must die. John Carpenter basically brought us a monster movie set in modern suburbia. The shape may be humanoid in form, but bears more similarities to a grizzly bear or a shark in the way that it stalks prey tirelessly and efficiently. Devoid of any personality or reasoning, the killer becomes simply an environmental hazard to avoid or eliminate. Carpenter's film is a master study in low-budget filmmaking. The flick has surprisingly little blood in it and minimal violence on screen. What we do get is a lot of tension and suspense. With a machine-like predator, the attacks feel inevitable, giving us a sense of dread throughout. Halloween also gave us the gift of Jamie Lee Curtis, the daughter of Hollywood royalty who would set the standard for scream queens and final girls everywhere. This one has spawned, I don't even know how many sequels and remakes, and all are readily available on multiple streamers. Personally, I recommend watching the first 2 back-to-back as one movie and ignoring the rest. Number 5, the Amityville Horror. Combining elements of true crime and the paranormal, the story of the Amityville haunting, which may or may not be based in truth, has worked itself into the American zeitgeist forever. A late entry into 70s horror, it was given the full treatment and a stellar, well-known cast. Sometimes a film comes along that manages to encapsulate the times perfectly. It's the story of a young, upwardly mobile couple that buys their first home and then loses everything trying to keep it. The Amityville house came with a history of violence, tainting the house forever for future families to contend with. The house not only needs repairs, but also just happens to contain one of those pesky portal to hell in the basement. In 1979, the times were changing drastically, and the American dream of a house, a car, and 2.5 children was being met with more and more social and economic roadblocks, many of which were put in place by the generation before. The story of the DeFeos and their possessed house became a perfect allegory for what us Generation Xers had in store. It's a creepy and scary film that spawned 2 sequels and a remake in 2005. There's also sprung up an entire genre of Amityville knockoff movies, There must be 100 B movies out there that have wedged the word Amityville into the title. The original is the one to see, and it is readily available in many formats.
No, that's not big enough. No, that's not big enough either. That's more like it. We're delighted to have you with us, and we extend a cordial welcome to you. We've lined up the top stars from Hollywood and from all over the world to entertain you on our giant screen with the new, colorful motion pictures you've been hearing about and reading about. To add to your enjoyment, we're all wound up to bowl you over at intermission time with live wire service at our snack bar, where you'll find a tempting variety of favorite foods and beverages. Your continued patronage is very, very welcome.
Number 6, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. So much has been said about this film that it has risen to legendary status. It's birthed a horror movie icon, become a teenage rite of passage, and stitched itself into the fabric of American pop culture. Inspired by the documentary film style and bloody images playing out on the nightly news from the Vietnam War, director Tobe Hooper gives us a visceral, relentless journey that mixes the surreal with reality. While it didn't invent the genre, it became the blueprint for the hillbillies terrorize Lost City folk movie genre forever. Its visual style, art direction, and editing was kind of groundbreaking for a horror movie in 1974, but has had never-ending influence since. It has been imitated so often and so poorly that it's become a bit of a trope in the present day. Every horror fan should see it, and please, watch it with the time period in mind. It may look like a micro-budget student film on its surface, but every scene and every frame is 100% intentional. It too has spawned several sequels, remakes, and reboots. I strongly suggest that you watch just the first two and forget about all the others. Number 7, Phantasm 1979. I love this entire franchise. It's wacky as hell and one of the last franchises to not have been rebooted. In 1979, when it came out, it got mixed reviews. The storyline is disjointed, and despite its gothic funeral home aesthetic, at its core, it's really an interplanetary sci-fi flick. It was a staple of the early 80s drive-in circuit. Now, I personally didn't see any of them until later in life, but I distinctly remember my Aunt Lori, who was a teenager at the time, coming back from the drive-in and gushing about how cool it was to my excited 12 or 13-year-old self. Angus Scrimm really brought something to the character of the tall man, and those flying orbs were terrifying. Written, produced, directed, shot, edited, and probably catered by Don Coscarelli, it's really a collection of extremely creepy and terrifying scenes strung together with a rambling plot barely worthy of a porn film. But somehow, it works. It has a dreamlike quality to it that's really unsettling, and he gives us some really likable characters. I strongly suggest watching Phantasm and then seeing Wes Craven's original 1984 Nightmare on Elm Street back to back and compare them. When put side by side, it's really clear that Craven was heavily influenced by Coscarelli's work. There are a total of 5 films in the Phantasm franchise, all written and directed by Don Coscarelli himself and starring many of the original actors. Phantasm by far is the most consistent franchise to come out of the 70s. Number 8, Salem's Lot. This made-for-TV miniseries debuted in 1979 when I was in like 8th or 9th grade. Thanks to an English teacher's recommendation of The Shining a few months before, I had just devoured everything Stephen King had published so far and was a big fan already. It spanned 2 nights and was granted a sizable budget and competent cast. They even brought in Tobe Hooper of Texas Chainsaw Massacre fame to direct. The story was condensed and altered in development, but still managed to capture the spirit of King's work. It really holds up today and is an entertaining revisit. I especially recommend it for younger horror fans seeking scares that are age-appropriate but not childish. There are scenes in Salem's Lot that still stick in my horror memories today, especially little Danny Glick floating outside of his friend's bedroom window, trying to get him to invite him inside. It brings the gothic into the modern really well. That scene was nightmare fuel for an entire generation. It's readily available on some streaming services. There was a little-known sequel, Return to Salem's Lot in 1987, and another TV remake with Rob Lowe and Rutger Hauer in 2004. At the time of running, a very lame remake has just dropped onto the streaming service Max. Stick with the original one from 1979. Number 9, Magic, 1978. Okay, what a fucked up flick this is. Anthony Hopkins as an early, chilling yet charming role as this low-rent magician named Corky, whose life changes when he adds Fats, a ventriloquist dummy, to his act. Corky's personality fractures, and a love triangle forms between Corky, his new girlfriend Anne Margaret, and the dummy. Part psycho and part child's play, this one will really mess with your sense of reality and keep you guessing as to who's pulling the strings as the bodies pile up. Anthony Hopkins and Anne Margaret really shine in this thriller. The weird twist ending with her is totally bonkers. WTF. The supporting cast is deep, and the score is from Jerry Goldsmith. Don't sleep on this one. It's a real hidden gem. Physical media is out of print, but you can watch it for free on YouTube. Number 10, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, 1971. Now, my generation grew up on a wave of children's movies filled with violence, death, and adult themes. I'm not being obtuse. I contend that this is a horror movie from start to finish. The first half is the whole world shitting on this kid Charlie. He's bullied by kids, living in abject poverty, and forced to provide and care for his lazy-ass family. Meanwhile, we have a sinister chocolatier that gathers some of the worst children he can find and then picks them off one by one in his secret lair in ways that would make Jigsaw giggle. He keeps an entire tribe of little people as slaves. There's a scene in this flick where they're on a boat ride through a tunnel that turns terrifying. On the walls of the tunnel plays film of a real live chicken getting its head axed off, 30 feet high behind them. Not special effects, no CGI, real animal death. All throughout the film, this smug Wonka guy sings, acts creepy, has loud verbal outbursts, sets them all up for failure, and then gloats over their demise. All the while appearing cheerful, having all the support of the other parents, and passing out candy. Where I come from, this guy wouldn't be able to live within 1,000 yards of a school, church, daycare, or park, if you know what I mean. Here's my hot take. I think kids ID with this flick because Wonka is the perfect representation of how kids experience adults. They're in awe of his abilities, envious of his power and status. They physically fear him, and yet seek his approval. He makes them jump through hoops that eventually mean nothing, and then baits them for failure using their own weaknesses. Wonka's weird mixed message is pretty much how grown-ups come off to kids. We need and want them while being confused and intimidated at the same time. For all intents and purposes, I say Willy Wonka is a horror film. It sucks you in with all the bright colors and catchy tunes, but has a sinister underbelly to it that makes us uncomfortable and leaves me feeling a little achy. That wraps up my top 10 favorite horror films of the 70s. I hope you enjoyed that.